The Mandela effect, a term coined in 2010 by Fiona Brew, a paranormal researcher, describes a phenomenon where large groups of people have collective false memories of a certain event, such as the spelling of a brand name that they believe has changed when it hasn't. Many people who've been affected by this believe that there's been some sort of shift in our reality, and that changes are sure to come. Some have even gone as far as to blame the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva, Switzerland, stating that the experiments that are being carried out there have started affecting our reality. Number 10. While most of us have a fair idea of where the North Pole is, and that it's an inhospitable part of the Earth that only a very small percentage of us will ever visit, it's now become the focus of the Mandela effect for multiple reasons. One surprising fact that many people are learning only now is that there's no land at the North Pole. Instead, it's been described as similar to one really large iceberg that's between 6 and 10 feet thick, depending on the area. Most people were aware that there is ice at the pole, but many assumed that there was land underneath the ice, and they're shocked to learn that beneath the ice lies nothing but ocean, for about 13,400 feet before reaching the ocean floor. One of the first people to set out on an expedition to find the North Pole was a man called William Edward Parry, who tried to find it in 1827, but his efforts were in vain. Many other expedition attempts were made after Parry, but thanks to starvation, frostbite, disease, and misadventure, they all failed. That is until 1926, when Roald Amundsen used an airship to find the pole, though some historians are adamant that either Frederick Cook or Robert Peary were the first to arrive in 1908, but thanks to their poor record-keeping during their expeditions, this couldn't be confirmed. The North Pole only sees one sunrise and one sunset per year. Since it sits right at the top of the Earth, its position relative to the Sun remains largely the same, unlike the rest of the planet, and hence anyone on the North Pole will experience only one sunset every 12 months. The sun rises there in March, and for the next 6 months the sun constantly shines. In September, the sun sets again, ushering in 6 months of night, thanks to the Earth's tilt relative to the sun. Despite the inhospitable conditions at the North Pole, a marathon is held there every year. Runners cover a distance of 26.2 miles through snow and ice, with temperatures often plummeting to -40 degrees. As for the Mandela effect, people are adamant that they learned in school that the North Pole is a continent. This goes hand in hand with the misconception that it contains a landmass of some kind, but the truth is that it was never considered to be a continent. Furthermore, many people are surprised when they look at a map of the world and notice that the North Pole is often shown without any ice. This is likely done because the shape of the ice is always changing, and it would be very expensive to keep changing maps every year or so. Others have expressed their shock at learning how close the North Pole is to its closest continents. They imagine it being far away from any landmass, but in reality, the ice covering the most northern part of the planet is very close to Greenland, Canada, Alaska, and Norway, as can be seen on any atlas. Most people who learn these facts are willing to accept that they were wrong, but others feel that the maps of the world have been changed somehow, thanks to the Mandela effect. They believe there's been a shift in our reality, and that the maps they once knew are no more. Number 9. Walker Crisps, known as chips in the US, is one of the most famous brands of crisps in the UK. The brand was founded by Henry Walker in 1848 in England, and in 1989, it was bought by the owner of the Lay's brand, Frito-Lay, which is a division of PepsiCo. Since the Second World War had only ended a few years prior, the Walkers & Son factory was experiencing very low output thanks to post-war rationing, and Walker desperately needed to find a solution. He realized that potato crisps were becoming ever more popular as a snack in the UK, and so he started slicing up potatoes, adding salt for flavor, and selling them in bags that cost 3 pence each. As soon as the brand started seeing some success, Walker came up with a slogan for the company, which was "Potato Crisps by Walkers, guaranteed absolutely pure." Salted and plain crisps were the only options until 1954, when rationing finally began. This was when the cheese and onion flavor was introduced. The new flavor was an instant hit, and Walker then started experimenting with other versions. In the 60s and 70s, the brand introduced salt and vinegar, prawn cocktail, and roast chicken flavors, paying tribute to fish and chips, the popular prawn cocktail starter, and the traditional English Sunday roast, respectively. Footballer Gary Lineker became a Walker's brand ambassador in 1984, and to honor this, the Salt and Vinegar name was changed to Salt and Lineker for a short time. The Walker's factory, that's based in England, remains the largest crisp production facility in the world, and it's estimated that the average British person eats about 150 packs of crisps every year. In 2016, Walker's released a range of flavors based on British people's favorite sandwiches. These included cheese toast and Worcestershire sauce, sausage and brown sauce, bacon and tomato ketchup, ham and mustard, roast chicken and mayonnaise, as well as cucumber and salad cream. Walker's is undoubtedly the UK's favorite crisp brand, which makes it all the more baffling that it's now spoken about as a Mandela effect mystery. People started complaining that they were buying the wrong flavors of crisps after Walker's switched the colors on the cheese and onion and salt and vinegar packets. They're adamant that the cheese and onion flavor used to be in the green packets, while the salt and vinegar were in the blue ones. One man even sent them an email asking why this was done, and was surprised when Walker's responded by saying that the packets had never been changed. He and others then took to the internet to disprove this, but they were unable to find any proof of that change, and may just have to accept that they're experiencing a false memory. Number 8. The Air Jordan basketball shoe was first created by Peter Moore in November of 1984, especially for Nike and Michael Jordan, one of the greatest players the game has ever seen. They were then made available to the public the following year, and since then they've remained as popular as ever, not only as a sport shoe but as a fashion accessory. Fans were intrigued when Jordan started sporting the shoes for the first time, but not many know that Jordan actually wanted to sign with Adidas instead of Nike. He told his agent that if Adidas offered him a deal anywhere close to Nike's, that he would sign with them. But this wasn't the case, and he ended up being sponsored by Nike instead. The Air Jordan logo is immediately recognizable, and Moore has stated that he drew the first draft in the spur of the moment. David Falk was the one who came up with the name Air Jordan, and when the two were put together, the fit was complete. Jordan was shown sketches of the red and black Air Jordans, to which he replied, "I can't wear that shoe. Those are the devil colors," likely referring to the colors of North Carolina State, which are red and white, the same colors as the shoe's sole. When Air Jordan 1s were in the works, people were skeptical that they would sell, since they would cost as much as $65. But before long, Jordan became one of the foremost players in the NBA, and the shoes started selling like hotcakes. Surprisingly, when the Air Jordan 2 was released, it didn't contain the trademark Nike swoosh, but the designers explained that they were more focused on the shoe's design and comfort, rather than branding, which a lot of people found refreshing. They were considered to be the first luxury basketball shoe, and were the only version to be produced in Italy. They took inspiration from women's boots and by all accounts were very comfortable to wear. In 1988, Jordan's contract with Nike was up, and since both Peter Moore and Rob Strasser were no longer with the brand, Jordan was considering signing with someone else. But when he was shown the Air Jordan 3, which contained the now famous Jumpman logo, he changed his mind and decided to stay. It's this very logo that's now considered a Mandela effect case. Although the logo is famous all over the world and has been for decades, some people are just now realizing that the silhouetted Jumpman in the logo isn't wearing basketball shorts but sweatpants. This left many people confused since they had the same shared false memory, but others tried to explain that they're likely remembering the thousands of Michael Jordan posters that were produced, showing him in the air about to dunk and wearing basketball shorts. Number 7. From a young age, we're taught about the organs inside our bodies in biology class, and most of us have a fairly good idea of how our organs are arranged. But in recent times, people have taken to the internet to report that they feel this has somehow changed, and that our bodies are now different than they were a few years ago. The first person to draw a diagram of the human body was a Renaissance physician called Andreas Vesalius, who lived from 1514 to 1564. He was also the first person to write a textbook on human anatomy, and managed to do this from observations he made while doing his own dissections. Vesalius came from a family of pharmacists and doctors, and completed his own studies in the field in Paris. Here, he learned about dissection, and at the time focused mainly on the study of bones, many of which he acquired from cemeteries in the city. He eventually became a lecturer in surgery, and often gave demonstrations on human anatomy. In 1543, he published his book, The 7 Books on the Structure of the Human Body. the most comprehensive text of human anatomy that had ever been published at the time. It also included accurate illustrations of the arrangement of human organs, and as a result, he was appointed as the Roman Emperor Charles V's household physician. Thanks to his new position, he became very affluent, and his medical practice was a huge success. He was given the title of Count and granted a lifetime pension, after which he relocated to Spain, where he became one of the Madrid court physicians. There's no doubt that he made a massive impact on the field of surgery and medicine, as well as advancing our knowledge of human biology. It's said that Vesalius became gravely ill while sailing from Jerusalem to Europe, and he was dropped off on the Greek island Zakynthos, but these reports were never confirmed and remain mere speculation. He would likely be appalled at the news that some people in modern times are still confused about how the arrangement of their own organs inside their bodies all lines up. But many people have started posting online that they remember being taught that their kidneys, for example, were in a different area than they actually are. They've made reference to false and true ribs, stating that they've never heard of these phrases before, not to mention the fact that our ribs are now situated much higher on our bodies than they used to be in the past. Some have gone as far as to suggest that if anyone has been experiencing strange aches, pains, or discomfort lately, it's likely because their organs and other parts of their bodies were altered in the past few days. One Reddit user complained that our ribs and kidneys never used to be anywhere near each other, but when they looked at a newer sketch of human anatomy, they realized that they were no longer near the spine, but much closer to the stomach. They went on to add that they were taught to place their hand on their hips and then locate their kidneys with their thumbs. In reality, our kidneys are positioned behind the ribcage for protection, and according to many doctors and surgeons, this has never changed and never will. Number 6. The Mandela effect is so called because of a false shared memory that ex-South African president Nelson Mandela passed away in the 1980s while he was still imprisoned on Robben Island. But the truth is that he lived into his mid-90s and only passed away in 2013. This is a perplexing case, since most people know that he was the president of South Africa and that he passed away in prison. He would never have gotten the chance to take up that position. Nonetheless, the false memory persists. It's also the case with George Clinton, one of the pioneers of the funk music genre. Clinton was born in Kannapolis, North Carolina in 1941, but spent most of his childhood growing up in Plainsfield, New Jersey. When he was a teenager, he formed a band called The Parliaments, which played doo-wop style songs. At the time, he was working in a barbershop in Plainfield, where he was tasked with straightening people's hair. Members of the band also worked at the barbershop, which was called Silk Palace. The group would eventually see some success, while named Parliament and Funkadelic during the 1960s, using music by Jimi Hendrix, Frank Zappa, and James Brown as inspiration. During that decade, they produced as many as 40 hit songs, 3 of which reached #1 on the charts. He started a solo career during the 1980s, but he soon got into legal trouble with his record label when he alleged that Bridgeport Music had illegally obtained the rights to his songs. He was then signed by Capitol Records as a solo artist, and as a member of the P-Funk All-Stars, and a string of hits followed. He also produced and worked on albums by the Red Hot Chili Peppers and Bootsy Collins. The Red Hot Chili Peppers were big fans of his and were delighted to have him produce their album Freaky Styley. He's since been cited by several hip-hop, rap, and funk artists as being a huge inspiration to them, and most of his music is still used by these artists as samples in modern times. But he wasn't just a talented musician, he also appeared in several films. The first was Graffiti Bridge, which was released in 1990. That same year, he appeared in House Party, and 4 years later landed a role in Good Burger. He also appeared in the cartoon series Space Ghost Coast to Coast, and voiced the character of the Bounce FM radio station in the Grand Theft Auto San Andreas game. A Reddit user took to the platform to state that he'd just read an article in which Clinton stated that he would be starting to tour again, and they were left very confused. They were convinced that they'd heard about his passing in 2017, but only now realized that he was still very much alive. Other users chimed in, stating that they remember reading articles on his passing, and that several artists had paid tribute to him since he had influence on their music. Others assured them that this was never the case, and that Clinton would continue touring for some time to come. Number 5. Some people are very good at remembering the geographical locations of the different countries of the world, while others are completely hopeless at it. This may be the reason for a weird Mandela effect regarding Italy, or more specifically, Sicily, which is situated at the country's southernmost tip. Sicily is one of the most densely populated islands in the Mediterranean Sea, and also the largest. It's separated by 2 miles from the rest of Italy by the Strait of Messina, and the island's capital is Palermo. The first settlers on the island arrived about 10,000 years ago, and since it was often visited by passing merchants, it's since gained people from many different cultures and ethnicities. It's named after the Sicily people, even though they weren't the first to arrive. The Romans occupied Sicily in the 3rd century BC, and it became their first ever province. It was then occupied by the Byzantines in 535. It was then occupied by Arabia, the Normans, and the Bourbons. It was eventually liberated in 1861, and in 1947, the island was granted regional autonomy. In modern times, it's become an industrialized region, with many oil refineries and chemical plants. But it is also known for its shipbuilding, food processing, salt extraction, winemaking, and textile production. It's also become part of the lore for the Mandela effect, as far as its geography is concerned. Most of us are aware that Italy is often referred to as the boot, thanks to its shape, which is reminiscent of a shoe or boot. Since Sicily sits at the bottom of this boot, it was often called Italy's toe, or the soccer ball, since from above Italy looks like a boot that's about to kick a ball. This has caused some confusion amongst internet users, who now believe the maps of the world are being changed thanks to the Mandela effect. One Reddit user has posted to the platform saying that he always knew Sicily to be much further away from the mainland. But when he looked at an atlas, he noted that it was almost touching the rest of Italy, and he's adamant that this never used to be the case in the past. This also isn't the first time that a continent or country is said to have shifted. Many people feel that New Zealand is no longer in the same position that it used to be, or that Australia used to be in the ocean on its own, rather than close to Indonesia. Others have stated that they remember South America being further to the west, Africa now being bigger than before, and Russia looking smaller than it used to, while China now seems bigger. Then there are people who feel Madagascar is too far south, that Syria is in the wrong place since it used to be east of Iran, or that Kazakhstan is now much bigger than they remembered it to be. Other users have tried to state that the human mind struggles to take in an entire world map, and that it's completely understandable that some of us remember land masses being in different areas than they actually are. But many people feel that there's something more sinister going on here, suggesting that reality is no longer what it used to be, and that the world is changing without us noticing. Number 4. The actor John Goodman is considered to be somewhat of an American treasure. He rose to fame after starring with Roseanne Barr in the sitcom Roseanne, but he's had a varied and very successful career since then, and has become one of the most famous faces in the country. He was born in Afton, Missouri, and when he was just 2 years old, his father, a postal worker, passed away after suffering a heart attack. This caused him to become withdrawn, and when his brother, who's 13 years older than him, left to attend college, it only made matters worse. He started gaining weight and was often bullied by the children in his school. But he managed to make friends at Boy Scouts, and here he received the discipline and structure that was lacking in his home life. He was an avid comic book reader and enjoyed reading his brother's Mad magazines. He later admitted that when he was still a boy, he used to shoplift Mad magazines from stores since he couldn't afford them. Hence, he was introduced to comedy at an early age, something that would be a factor later on in his life. Following his high school years, he earned a football scholarship at Missouri State University, but he never played for the team since he suffered an injury. Instead, he started focusing on theater and drama, studying with the likes of Kathleen Turner and Tess Harper. He eventually graduated in 1975, having earned a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. He then moved to New York to pursue a career in acting. He started out doing voiceovers and acting in commercials as well as plays, but made his film debut in 1982, appearing in the movie Run. 4 years later, he landed his first major role in the movie True Stories, in which he delivered one of his most famous lines, "I'm 6'3" and maintain a consistent panda bear shape." In the 2000s, he became the voice of Dunkin' Donuts in their commercials, and also voiced the character of Robot Santa Claus in Futurama. His further voice work includes the character of Pacha in The Emperor's New Groove and Sully in Monsters, Inc. He's still acting to this day, but according to some people, he actually passed away years ago in either 2014 or 15. They recall that he suffered a heart attack while in the midst of doing voiceover work for an animated movie, though they can't recall which one. A good explanation for this is the fact that his character in Roseanne, Dan Connor, passed away from a heart attack in the show, and they may be confusing him with another actor, John Candy. It also doesn't help that he's been the subject of several death hoaxes over the years, and possibly some people never realized that these reports were false until now. Number 3. It's strange to think that pizza rolls have been around since 1968, when they were invented by Gino Paolucci. He'd grown accustomed to using his egg roll wrapping machine, and started thinking of new ways to use it. As for the brand Totinos, it started with a couple called Jim and Rose Totino, when they opened a pizzeria in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It was intended to be a small restaurant for takeout, but before long the pizzas had become so popular that they opened a sit-down restaurant, and at one point were serving as many as 500 pizzas per day. Rose often recalled the story of how she needed $1,500 to open the restaurant, and she approached a loan officer to do so. But the man was confused as he'd never heard of pizza before, and she decided to make one for him to try. Needless to say, he was impressed and handed over the money. With the restaurant a roaring success, the couple then opened a frozen pizza plant called Totinos Finer Foods, which was just as successful, and eventually they sold the entire business to Pillsbury in 1975. Rose was given the title of corporate vice president, and in doing so, became the first person in the company to ever reach those heights. This is when Paolucci enters the frame. He'd already invented the pizza roll and was selling them under the brand name Gino's Pizza Rolls. But in 1985, he also sold the product to Pillsbury, and it was rebranded as Totinos. In 1979, the company patented its crisp crust technology, and for the first time, pizza crust stayed crispy, even though the snacks had been frozen. Jim Totino eventually passed away in 1981, and Rose passed away in 1994. She was honored in 2008 by being inducted into the Minnesota Inventors Hall of Fame for her contribution to the frozen pizza industry, and for revolutionizing the crust that we all know so well these days. Totinos remains the foremost frozen pizza producer in the country, which makes it all the more baffling that people consider the brand name to be part of the Mandela effect phenomenon. People online have expressed their frustration at the fact that they've always read and written the name Totinos wrong, since they always thought it was spelled Tostinos with an extra S added in. One man became aware of the error when his wife wrote a shopping list containing the name Tostinos Pizza Rolls. But when he got to the shop, he picked up a few packs and only then realized that she'd spelled it wrong, but also suddenly remembered he'd been spelling it the same way for years. This perturbed him, since the absence of the S also meant that they'd been pronouncing the brand name wrong all along. One user replied, stating that the name definitely used to include the extra S, and he immediately started searching the internet for proof. But try as he might, he couldn't find a single instance where the name Tostinos was used, leaving him very confused. Proof lies in the fact that Totinos has existed for a very long time, and since the name has always been spelled the same, this is likely a very good example of a shared false memory. Number 2. The group known as Massive Attack is often cited as one of the most influential electronic bands of all time, as well as one of the first ever bands to use a style now known as trip-hop, which originated in England in the 1990s. The group was formed in Bristol, England in the mid-1980s, when dance music was on the rise in popularity in the country. They used elements of hip-hop, jazz, reggae, and rap to create a brand new genre of music that proved very popular among clubgoers. At first, it was made up of just 3 members: Robert Del Naja, also known as Delge, Grant Marshall, known as Daddy G, and Andrew Voles, who's also called Mushroom. The latter member once explained how the group came to be when Daddy G gave him a membership card to a club called The Dugout. He was only 15 years old at the time, but with this card in hand, he could see any of the hip-hop groups and artists that came to play at the club, and when he heard a group called The Wild Bunch, he loved their music so much that he started following their tour around the country. Daddy G and Delge were members of the group, and soon he became friends with the pair. He was allowed to do some mixing between their sets, and they soon realized that he had a real talent for it. When 2 of the group's members, Nellie Hooper and Miles Johnson, left to pursue other avenues, Mushroom was asked to join, and the trio renamed themselves as Massive Attack in 1988. They released their first album, titled Blue Lines, shortly after. It featured Unfinished Sympathy, a song that featured hip-hop artist Tricky and singer Shara Nelson. It's still very popular today, but Delge would later reveal that the song album's arrangement was more of an accident than anything else. He recalled that Mushroom was mixing on the decks and Shara was singing a song called Kiss and Tell, which would later become Unfinished Sympathy. They all felt that the sound wasn't really coming together, but when they started adding in keyboards, it all started to make sense, and they knew they'd created something unique. Upon its release, the album was being played in clubs across the country, and the group was on the road to success. They followed this up with their second album, Protection, in 1994. Shara left the group and was replaced by Tracy Horn, who seemed to be a perfect fit. They released one more album called Mezzanine in 1998, but the following year, Mushroom decided to part ways with the group. Daddy G wasn't present for the production of their fourth album, 1000th Window, since he was on sabbatical, but it was received with mixed reviews, since many people felt it sounded too similar to the previous release. They released their last studio album in 2010, and it was well received, but the group has since seen many lineup changes, though Delge and Daddy G are still in the group and still touring decades later. The group's music is seen as iconic and can still be heard being played in clubs the world over, but they're also the subject of a Mandela effect case that has baffled even some of the most devoted fans. When one man posted online that he realized one day that the track Unfinished Sympathy was not called Unfinished Symphony, he was taken aback, since he'd been a fan of Massive Attack for decades and never realized his mistake. He was reminded by another user of the Mandela effect, and before long, many other people started posting that they had the same recollection, and were adamant that the name must have been changed somewhere along the line, thanks to a shift in their reality. Others believed that they were getting the title mixed up with the popular Verve song Bittersweet Symphony, but the far more likely explanation is that they simply misread the title and were never corrected. Number 1. Bob Marley, the legendary reggae musician who passed away in May of 1981, is the focus of more than one Mandela effect mystery, one of which deals with his passing. Many people seem to remember that he was assassinated in 1976, when 7 men burst into his house in Kingston, Jamaica, and ended his life. In reality, the event did happen, but Marley was wounded in his shoulder, and 4 others were wounded, but they all survived and eventually made full recoveries. The attackers were never identified, and the reason for the assassination attempt was thought to be political, since he was believed to be a supporter of the People's National Party. It was suggested that the Jamaican Labour Party was responsible, but this was never proven. Then there's the misconception that Marley only passed away when he was in his 40s or 50s, but that it was a result of a car accident that occurred in Jamaica. In reality, he passed away when he was 36 years old after melanoma was found under one of his toenails. It eventually spread and ultimately claimed his life. Strangely, the first doctor to inspect the melanoma told him it was nothing to worry about, since he'd likely just injured his toe playing soccer. When the real cause was eventually found, Marley refused treatment. But he did, however, consent to having some of the malignant tissue removed, and it was replaced with skin from his thigh. But he never attended any follow-up treatments, and without them his condition only worsened until he passed away. Another strange Mandela effect mystery involving Marley is that people think his song I Shot the Sheriff was written by Eric Clapton. But this instance is a little easier to explain, since Clapton did cover the track and has performed it live on many occasions. One of the latest instances that's making the rounds on the internet is that many people always thought the song Bad Boys, which served as the theme song for the movie of the same name, was written and performed by Marley, when it was actually written by the band Inner Circle. The band was also formed in Jamaica, Marley's hometown, but this doesn't explain the confusion since Bad Boys doesn't sound much like any of Marley's songs, and the vocals on the track don't resemble his unique voice. One Reddit user posted that he and his girlfriend made the same mistake, and when they searched the internet for the song's actual origin, they were shocked to learn that it was Inner Circle rather than Marley. While some people feel that the Mandela effect is to blame, others have assured them that Marley never sang the song, since he passed away 6 years before it was even written, and hence they only have their faulty memories to blame for this misconception. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.